We always hope things go off without a hitch, but sometimes they don't. To find out more about contingency plans, stay tuned.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Greetings, everyone, and I'm glad you could make it back because we're talking about contingency plans. And, well, there's seems to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, the two big ones are business continuity and disaster recovery.
Yeah, those are the buzzwords of the day, that's for sure.
I do love it. I tell you what, when I hear the word plan, I go, ooh, paperwork. This sounds awesome. But the first we're going to talk about is business continuity, right?
Business continuity.
Business continuity.
Yes, we are. We are going into business continuity plans, or the BCP, as you might hear it more commonly referred to as. But yes, and you did make a reference to paperwork. Yep, this is a good time. If you love filling out forms and creating things, you are going to really enjoy creating a business continuity plan, and also as we get down the road to a disaster recovery plan. Now, that being said, it is a bit of a drudgery, but it is a necessary evil. We must have these things because eventually bad things may happen. So if we're not prepared for them, if we don't have a plan to recover from it, then, well, we might as well just close our doors, and we're just rolling the dice on how long we stay in business. So we want to plan for these things. Those people that fail to plan to fail, right? So let's start talking about what is business continuity? Like, what does that mean? So business continuity means that in the event that some sort of disruption occurs, can we stay doing business? Like, how do we continue providing our service? That's what business continuity means. It doesn't mean that you don't have an issue happening, but it means that you're still able to conduct business. Hence the name, business continuity. You continue doing business, right? Justin, yes, you have.
So I was just thinking, like, the context of your business, whether you have a product or maybe a SaaS solution or something. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing continuity can be a little bit of a squishy term, right? So if I have like a SaaS product that millions of people rely on, then my continuity, I need to be up and running all the time. Right. But if I have like the slow release government contracts, then my continuity is, I'm like, well, cool, I get a little more leeway in that capacity. Am I right in that assumption?
So you have seen the fact that this is not a one-size-fits-all
love it
kind of thing. Now, we do have generalizations, and the concepts will be similar, if not the exact same, between the businesses, but how that looks specifically can be, it's a one-fits-one kind of idea, right? Because your business is different than my business. Even if we do the same kind of business, there will be some overlap, but everything's different because the people, the technologies that are being used are not identical, and even if they were, they're probably not being used identically. So you start to see that this is going to be a lot of assessment going on to figure out how we can continue business continuity. So let's move on. Let's talk about the business continuity planning phases. If you look up business continuity planning phases, you'll probably see some different ones. Some have these phases, some have those phases, and none of them are right or wrong necessarily. They're probably just labeled differently, and some of them will group different phases together under one phase and call that something. So if you're confused, like, I looked up business continuity phases, and Daniel, what you told me was not the same as what I saw. That wouldn't be uncommon for that to happen. Let me go through the ones that you normally see in a way that they might normally be labeled, and hopefully that helps you out with at least understanding the concepts behind the phases. First phase is going to be risk assessment. You want to assess the risk of your business. So if we run a brick and mortar business, we have to worry about, and we do it on the West Coast of the United States, maybe we have to worry about hurricanes. Maybe we have to worry about windstorms. Maybe we have to worry about droughts. Maybe we have to worry about forest fires, right? Those are natural disasters that happen in those areas. Like we're here in Florida, a real risk that we have to our company here, IT Pro TV. Hurricanes, it's a real thing, it's a real danger in Florida, something we have to deal with. Now, the risk for us isn't as high as if we were in Miami or if we were on a coastal city, right? Or in the panhandle of Florida, right? So that's what risk assessment actually does. It says, well, let's take a look at the factors around it and let's see how likely it is that these things would happen. We'll assign a value to that. And we can talk more about that when we get into risk management. But that's the idea. We need to do a risk assessment to find out what the risks actually are. And once we have that, we can move on to the next phases. Just really quickly, I'll give you a handful. I wrote a few down. Human error, a couple of risks that might look out, right? Bob's in the server room with a cup of coffee, trips over a cord, and spills onto the server. That's usually a bad idea. So that's a risk that could happen. We need to account for it in case it might occur. I've mentioned national disasters. We also have to worry about things like terrorism. It's a real thing. It does happen. And if you have a brick and mortar shop, that could be something you need to worry about. If you're more of a cloud-based entity, probably cyber terrorism would be more your line of business, but there you go. And then, of course, computer-based attacks. As we come, this would be, I have been targeted by a threat actor for X, Y, or Z reasons, and what is the risk to that? What do we look like vulnerability-wise, and how do we prepare for it? All right, well, moving on. Then we go into the BIA, or the Business Impact Analysis. That is a fun, right? So this is the idea that if one of these threats were to be actualized, what would be the impact to our business? Would it be high? Would it be low? Medium? Blah, blah, blah. Would it be money, right? So really what you're trying to figure out is how bad would it be if this happened? Because if we don't know, we might just think, oh, it wouldn't be so bad. And then it happens, you're like, oh, it was way worse than we thought. Because we didn't really do an impact analysis to our business to figure that out properly. It's a good idea. Justin, you got something?
Yeah, I was just thinking, are most of the times these impacts, are those reported in some kind of dollar amount? Or are there other metrics that we can use for reporting, how bad is this going to be? Because when you say, we're going to lose $100,000, hey, hold up, what? Yeah. Versus, what's the alternative?
Versus well, the answer is yes. It gets reported in many different ways. Monetary value is one of the typical ones. It could be your, what's the idea here? Your
reputation?
Yes, reputation.
Oh, gotcha.
For some reason, I thought it started with a P.
It could be your, I was like, reputation.
Right. If you are smeared in some way because you allowed something to happen, people don't trust you anymore, they're going to stop using your business. And then guess what that does? That affects your dollar amount. Yeah. It ultimately usually comes down to some sort of monetary value, because that's what people in the C-level tend to really be focused on, and that's what gets their attention so many times. And it takes money to run a business. So if you're not making money, or you're losing money, you're hemorrhaging it because of all these horrible things that have happened, you're going to be out of business for long, and no one's doing anything. And also will be what resources will need to be recovered at that point in time. So what loss to our systems and functionality has occurred due to the threat, okay? Then we move into planning. Once we figured all that out, we're going to take all that stuff, we're going to churn and burn it, and we're going to plan for those risks. Okay. A hurricane is coming, right? Eventually, it will hit our building. What do we do when that occurs? So that is the planning phase. We're going to figure all that stuff out, and we're going to write down all sorts of stuff. We're going to put it into a lovely file, and everybody's going to get copies of that file that's involved with that plan. And then when the disaster happens or the disruption occurs, we'll be set off, and we will do our thing. Well, it's like we're our own little catcher in the rye that we run around with, just reading every day. I guess it's not that bad, but it's a little hyperbole. But we should be quite familiar, especially if we are one of the responsible parties, a part of that business continuity plan. We need to know what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it, and act accordingly when those disruptions occur. And of course, once that's done, we got the plan ready to go. We're going to test it, and we're going to fine tune it. Because maybe I think I know what I'm supposed to do, but then disaster happens and I realized, oh man, the fire extinguisher is right here. It's not here. And I'm the one that's supposed to get the fire extinguisher due to a fire in the building, right? Why is it not here? Or it's not charged. It's, right? So
it hasn't been inspected in 7 years.
Exactly. We need to test these things. Just because we've planned for something doesn't mean that our plan is any good. So we have to test that plan, verify its validity, its ability, its efficaciousness, right? To actually do what we need it to do.
And revise where needed, right?
And revise where needed, and that's that maintenance. And this is an ongoing cycle. This is not something that we ever stop doing. It's going to be a living document that you schedule out and say twice a year. Once a year, we're going to revise our business continuity plan, and then twice a year, we're going to test it and give it maintenance. There you go, right? So those are the phases of business continuity. During the testing phase, a couple of things I wanted to throw in there. Do things like tabletops. That way you can engage in it without actually having to do it. It's just more like a thought experiments on those things. Hey, are the numbers where they are supposed to be? Is the person's name is in the area of responsibility? Is that correct? Is the contact information correct? Those kind of things. Just sit down and go through that stuff. We actually are engaged with a company called Black Hill Security. They created a game out of a deck of cards for you to be able to do tabletops for it's incident response. So if a cyber threat has occurred, what do you do? And it's really fun. If you haven't heard of it, it's called Backdoors and Breaches. Check that out. Super cool. Really effective for doing interesting incident response and see what works and what doesn't. What happens when the thing you think is supposed to work doesn't work? Those tabletop exercises are worth their weight in gold. Do walkthroughs, checklists, and of course, training. If anybody needs to understand how something works, they need to be trained on it and checked out and verified that they know how to do the job that they are required to do when the disaster occurs. So there you go. That is business continuity and business continuity plans. I do have a sample for us to take a look at, just to kind of see how those things work out and look as a document. So, but Justin, you look like
actually the document may answer my question. So you go ahead and do your thing,
right,
and then if my question still stands, I'm like, Daniel, that was real nice, except it still doesn't help me.
Okay,
but let's take a look at it.
Let's jump in the document. Let's see if we can get some. So here's the URL. I'll add it to the learner resources. This is from safetyculture.com. And there you go. It's a bit lengthy, but it's just a nice business continuity template that they've provided for the world to use. And I thought it was not too complex, but not too simplistic either for us to use as a demonstration. So here we go. They're starting talking about inspection. Does it say exactly what they're doing? So we got departments. This is going to be done by operations. Who prepared it? When it was conducted, the location, completed, and then a score of if anything went wrong. If you wanted to score it, you could. But here they're talking about the inspection. They go through the scope and the objectives. So what are we doing? The purpose of the BCP, right? I'll let you read all this stuff, but basically, like, what are we testing and why are we testing it? Okay. Operations, at risk, and recovering plan. So here is the operation. So if I wanted to take an operation, let's say, for us, what would it be? It would be creating content. So that's an operation that we do. I could put in some risks. All the computers get viruses. They go down. Now we're unable to continue. How do we continue doing business if that were to happen? Is our plan to buy a bunch of new laptops? Get them over here? Do we use cloud to try to avoid that so that if the laptops all burned in a fire, we would be able to purchase those new laptops, access that cloud solution? You start to see how this is supposed to go. And here you go, operational area, description of the operation, rate of impact on the business, and you can put something like critical, medium, high, low, medium, that kind of stuff. Let's see here. I'm not going to go too crazy with this because it's pretty straightforward. This is a template. It's not filled out. It's just giving you descriptors for how to fill this out. But you do have high-level sections like this one, roles and responsibilities. Very important key aspect to your BCP. So put all the people that are supposed to be in there, their contact information, and the description of their responsibilities. Very important. You'll see in this one they have that employee actually sign their area of responsibility. That lets everybody know that you knew what your job was, because there's going to be some after action if a disaster occurs, and fingers are going to want to get pointed. So if you do your job well, they can come here and say, you said you knew how to do this. It's right here in black and white, right? Brian Mitz, how dare you, sir?
How dare you?
Yes.
I don't know about
you
that.
become a Southern gentleman. Yeah. Let's see here. Again, more areas of responsibility stuff, and that's the end of this. Very simple. And this might not be the only BCP. This is for a specific operation. It might be for your general operations. It might be for specific operations. You might have multiple BCPs depending on what it is you're doing. Did we answer your question, Justin? Or did we get it?
No.
Oh, what was
no.
your question?
So I was kind of thinking, whenever I hear BCP versus disaster recovery, because within that we talk about the risk, and sometimes I think of disasters.
Yeah.
Right? But how are those related then? Like, how does a business, like, are they related? Are they totally different things?
So you're
Or,
asking,
like,
business continuity and disaster recovery, are they related, and if so, how?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, kind of, right? So business continuity is concerned with how do we keep doing business while an emergency situation is occurring.
Okay.
Right? Disaster recovery is a disaster has occurred and we could not continue doing business. We have stopped operations.
Okay.
Now we need to recover to a minimal viable product or a minimal viable service offering where we can actually at least minimally do some business and get back to that, right? So that's the difference between the two. So now that really jumps us into disaster recovery properly. And because, Justin, that was a great segue because that points out the differences. You can see they're very similar. And it's easy to get confused on like, and you typically see BCPDR, right? Or right, business continuity disaster recovery, BCDR.
Okay.
Right?
So,
you hear it that way a lot.
So I was getting confused because within risk assessment, we were talking about natural disasters, terrorism. I was like, I mean, those are disasters.
Yes.
How is this not but a disaster recovery is like things really hit the fan.
Man, that Cat 5 landed on my doorstep.
I was like, can I come in?
Yeah.
What do we do now? Our business is not continuing. How do we get back up and running to some like agreeable standard, right?
See, he gets it.
I try.
This is not too hard, right? and really a lot of it's very similar as far as like you need to plan for it, right? But there'll be just some subtle differences. That's one of them. Let's see here. Planning to stay running during a business event or during an emergency event is BC, and the DR is how to get back to it after an emergency event. Key components are going to include contact information, right? Just like what we saw with business continuity. Team info, there might be a disaster recovery team. Hopefully there is. If it's just one guy or girl, God help you. It's going to be a rough.
I tell you what, I about broke out into a sweat. I was like, I don't want to be
I
that
think your
person.
nose is bleeding.
Yeah, that'd be rough.
Yeah. Another couple of things we need to concern ourselves with would be the financials, as far as this, like how much is it going to cost us to get back to a minimum ability to like limp along but still conduct business, right? So get that information. And legal as well. A lot of times legal will be involved. You might have both of those as well in your business continuity, but I really wanted to touch on those here with disaster recovery. Again, got a template. I went out to the interwebs and said, I guarantee there's some disaster recovery templates out there. I found this one. Let's jump into that. This one's from searchdisasterrecovery.com. Again, the link will be in the learner resources. And again, it's just a template for us to put in things like our client name, IT disaster recovery plan template. Who wrote it? Guy's got more creds than an FBI agent. Let's see here. This is one interesting part is the revision history. They are making, kind of like implying, this will be revised. This will need to, again, living documents that you need to continually test, scope out, and verify that it's actually like meaningful to your company, right? So, and as you make those changes, what date, who did it, and the description of why the change was made. Let's keep going. There's a long white space, but here they kind of point out those key areas. We have the policy statement, the objectives for why we're doing this. The very first thing was the statement of intent. Key personnel, right? Just like what we saw before. You're going to have a team. If you can't, points of contact are so important with this kind of stuff. And make sure you have backups for your backup. If I can't contact Bob, I call Sally. If Sally's unavailable, I go to Alice, right? Multiple points of failure on these things is highly recommended. Get all that information, make sure that it is verified, then test it, that if I call this number, Sally answers the phone. If I call this number, Billy's going to wake up out of a dead sleep and say, I'm on call, what's up? Just testing, good job, Billy, right? That's what we're trying to do. We have external contacts, Emergency response. So this is really getting into like how do we alert, escalate, and plan invocation, right? How do we enact our DR plan? Assembly points, the disaster recovery team, and all that entails there. Emergency alert, escalation, DRP activation. You start to see this is broken down. I really like this one now. This is a far cry from what we saw with the business continuity plan, which was very general. This is much more detailed. But as a disaster recovery plan, this is a lot of the stuff that you're going to need to have in that. So I thought this was just a really good template for an IT disaster for us to be able to look at. You'll notice this one also has a place for media, right? Let's jump there. Media contacts, media strategies, what happened, how to happen, and what are you doing about it? You're going to have somebody that actually goes out and talks to the media if you are a large enough entity that this is impacting like everyday Joes, right? Here's your media team. Those people are going to be doing that. Rules for dealing with it. So say this, don't say that kind of thing. Insurance, if that's available. So you're starting to see lots of stuff in here. Financial assessments, requirements, legal actions. And then I love this one, DRP exercising. This is, you're going to tabletop this. You're going to do some trial and error. Make sure everything is working as you hope it would. And then any appendices for just random information that would be important to anybody reading these documents. So hopefully that gave you a good idea. Again, I'll put links to this stuff in the learner resources so you can look those over. And of course, go out to the interwebs, find others, see how they compare and contrast so that you get a really good idea of what these things look like in real life so that you can prepare to continue to do business in case of an emergency or recover from an emergency if that is the case.
Now, Daniel, we've been talking about these policies and procedures that tend to be very reactive in nature. Am I?
They kind of have to be.
Yeah, they kind of have to be. But that does not mean you should not be proactive in trying to prevent them in the first place, right? So, for instance, business continuity, I already have duplicates of my services running if I'm running an online business. This one goes down, who cares? Right?
Spin another one up.
Yeah, it's ready to go. So keep that in mind. And for some reason, when you said redundancy, I just thought space shuttle, right? Because those
redundant systems.
Yeah, the NASA, they got redundant systems for redundant systems for redundant systems. Yeah. And it's very important.
Backup flight crews, everything.
Yeah, crazy. And you should as well. And well, you know what? We're going to have to continue on with GSEC, but for this episode, we're going to get out of here. So signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Justin Dennison.
I'm Daniel Lowry.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.